Hi everyone, welcome to SJW, Social Justice Weirdos. I'm Charley McCorn. I use they, them, their pronouns.
And I am Lenny Peppers. I use she, her, hers pronouns.
So, this week, it was my turn to pick a topic, and I decided to go a little outside my wheelhouse, as it were. And I'd talk about the life of Rachel Carson. She is maybe one of the most important biologists, conservationists, and critic of pesticides of all time. She's kind of the reason that, DDT isn't around anymore. We're not spraying our kids with DDT in the pools.
Speak for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. The only DDTs are still around are the professional wrestling ones. Those ones are also deadly, but done by professionals. Unless you think your kid might be like the next, North American champion. In which case, listen, hey listener, do you have a kid nearby? Okay, grab them in a headlock and then DDT into the ground and do that 10 times a day so they get ready, to become the North American champion. You have to start them with the head trauma early to become professional wrestlers. That's how it happens.
If you want your kid to be any type of professional, you should start with the head trauma early, no matter what.
Oh, absolutely. Politics, gotta have some brain damage if you want to get into politics.
Especially in Montana politics. I mean, Gianforte's our governor, so...
Oh, sure. People who actually, cause head trauma to other people and then walk away from their sentence from it because they're rich. That's what Montana's all about, right? Letting the rich people get away with crime. God, I love our state. We are so put together. So speaking of states, Pennsylvania, 1907, the birthplace of Rachel Louise Carson. She was born near the Allegheny River, near Pittsburgh. Her parents had a farm, and they instilled in her a love of reading from a very young age. Around the age of 8, she started writing her own stories. These were usually stories kind of in the thread of Beatrix Potter, I guess. All of the animals out in the field are having adventure. She started writing since she was 8, published one at 10 in a local newspaper. And the natural world was her jam. She loved it. She loved spending time in it. She loved the ocean. And she loved reading books about it there too.
That is so charming. Who doesn't love the ocean? I absolutely think that I could have been published at 10. If Watership Down hadn't already been written, I maybe even could have written that.
So she goes to college, which was now Chatham University. I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't know if there's any Pennsylvanians listening, but to be fair, all of your proper nouns are super weird out there. You just don't know what's going on.
Totally. My husband went to art school there for 2 years, and I still can't understand a damn thing he's saying.
But she studied English originally to be a writer. But then it's well, you know what? I can write no matter what. I'm going to switch to biology. And she continued writing. She continued studying biology. She eventually made her way into graduate school. She was always at the top of her class, always an astounding wit and force for knowledge in the classroom. And she started working in different labs, doing experimentations on rats, to make a little extra money.
As we do.
Yeah. So here's where things get a little interesting, we'll say. So writing her first book, one of her first big books was called The Edge of the Sea. And this was all about sort of the ecology of sea life. It's what happens here? What do we know? What is the thing that we are not seeing beneath the ground?
So she's about 40 years old now. This has been a very, very long journey since the publishing of her first book at age 10.
Yes, a long ways. Her writing style had not actually improved. It was all poorly misspelled. The R's were spelled backwards, delightfully, and sometimes CH sounds were spelled with an S, Because when you start writing at 10, you only start writing at that same level.
Oh, yeah, totally. I still, when I'm writing red rum on the door, get the R's all stupid. So
That's what I've learned anyway.
I also plan on doing all of my graduate level papers just like that. All handwritten, all in crayon.
I already do, which is probably why I'm so unemployed and broke right now. One thing that she became very, very intrigued on was the federal use of widespread pesticide spraying. Now, pesticides obviously were a huge boon. They really helped win World War II in a lot of ways, preventing malaria, yellow fever, and other diseases that would kill soldiers, dead, take them out of the fight. It changed the war around, and so pesticides were very frequently used. However, she said, we're just dumping these on everything. Private lands, public lands, we're spraying DDT on kids in swimming pools. We are doing this. There's got to be something. There's something else. Like this can't be safe. Like this is worrying to me. So for the rest of her, so from this point on, the rest of her life was studying pesticides.
I mean, we had to come to a point in the world where someone somewhere was like, maybe we shouldn't spray chemicals on our kids.
Her research led to the publication of her 1962 book, Silent Spring, which is her best known work by far. The book is about her research and her studies and sort of discovering what the harmful effects of pesticides were on the environment and on people. Now, there was obviously environmental movements in the United States before this, right? Obviously, there were people who were realizing, maybe we need to be more careful about how we're treating this planet, how we're treating the land. However, the environmental movement as we know it today started with this book.
Wow. Okay.
She was like, we're spraying pesticides. Look at how many birds are dying. Look at how small our birds are. Look at how underdeveloped our birds and our animals are becoming. What is this doing to humans?
What year was this?
This was 62.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So this sort of pushed her into her studies, and it led to some big things. There was a Supreme Court case that did not go the way of the environment, but it sort of opened up the door for some of these larger things. And this book, which was a huge hit, like this book kind of like blew everyone away, except the government, who's like, well, she's lying. This is propaganda. Think about how terrible all these mosquitoes are. Think about the fire ant, huh? We have to kill all of the fire ants. Do you think tiny birds, we can have tiny birds as long as there are no fire ants.
I can see the logic in it. I mean, you get rid of all the fire ants, you could have like maybe even fire ant-sized birds. Okay, now I'm torn on which side that I'm on.
And the USDA and the Department of Agriculture, huge critics of her for her entire life. They said that she was a rabble-rouser. They said that she, some people threw around the idea that maybe she was a communist. I
mean, in Mother Russia, when rouses rebels, those are clearly backwards R's. I mean, that's like an obvious sign for communists.
The title Silent Spring kind of comes from this thing of, I went to the spring where there's usually life. There is no life now. What is happening? It's pesticides on that. So also through this time, Rachel was battling breast cancer. Her treatment was a little rough. And, okay, sad news, spoiler alert, she ended up dying in 1964, like right after Silent Spring was published, like 2 years later, not even 2 years later, like 18 months after Silent Spring was published, she died of breast cancer.
That is tragic. Some of the best people are taken from us far too soon.
That's why I'm always afraid, because I do like so many cool things. I'm kind of right 18 months from this. Let's see what happens. And then it turns out like, whoops, the pandemic happened. So that one I kind of take responsibility for being so successful. Like that's how life goes.
I feel like I knew that, like deep down inherently. And until you just said it out loud right now, I didn't realize what that feeling was.
Now, Rachel Carson's never married. She did, however, have a very interesting relationship with a woman named Dorothy Freeman that she met in 1953.
We know what that most likely really means.
So, again, I'm not trying to retroactively apply any kind of sexual identity to someone who didn't outwardly claim that during the time or would not have had the verbiage or the definitions to really like use terms for themselves that fit who they were. And there is some debate about the extent of her relationship with Dorothy Freeman. They could have been just like super close BFFs. However, there have been some who believe that Freeman and Carson's relationship may have been a bit more romantic in nature.
Experts always go with, they were very good friends.
One of the things stems from the two of them wrote extensively to each other. And I mean extensively. They wrote, I believe, over 900 letters in their life to each other in the course of their relationship, whatever the extent of that will be. That was about 12 years. 900 letters in 12 years. That means they were writing each other 75 times a month for 12 years. Is that right? Is that right? Did I do that right? See, if I could do math, I wouldn't worry about this.
Can any comics do math? Is that a thing that we're supposed to know how to do?
They were writing on average like 6.25 letters to each other every month for their whole friendship. Some of these letters still exist and have been published into a really beautiful book called Love, Rachel, which sort of extends that. However, both women destroyed large numbers of these letters in their lifetimes. And the contents of which were very, I guess, closely guarded. Dorothy Freeman was married to a man. She had a husband during this whole time. And she did share some of her letters with her husband. But the letters just sort of showed a very strong friendship. However, other letters, and this is just a direct quote from one. This one goes from Dorothy to Rachel. It says, quote, "I love you beyond expression. My love is as boundless as the sea."
That's beautiful.
And then Rachel Carson's very last letter to Freeman, sent right before she died. Quote, "Never forget, dear one, how deeply I have loved you all these years." And again, shortly before Rachel's death, she and Dorothy Freeman destroyed hundreds and hundreds of these letters. Who knows what their context is? Who knows what's going on?
As a poly person who has both a husband and a girlfriend, I wonder what her husband thought of that. Like, was he totally just accepting? There's no point in destroying them all if there wasn't, like, some reason to, like, hide something. I don't know. It's hard to, I mean, you can't, like, just assume, like, in situations like these. But as the romantic that I am, I would like to think that they were all, like, deeply personal, deeply beautiful, deeply sexual letters to each other. It makes me wonder what would happen if I saved all of my texts between me and, like, any of my lovers and just, like, stuck them in the attic for my kids to find someday, and then they could, like, publish them and turn them into a book and be like, Grandma was freaky. Anyway, that's way off topic. Tell us more about her.
So, this sort of leads to sort of the larger conversation about the impact Rachel Carson had on the world of environmental protection. In protecting our environment, as we are realizing as the world continues to get scarier and scarier, and the hanging sort of Damocles of climate change hangs over our heads, is that protecting the environment is one of the most important things that we can do. Irreparable damage has been done. We need to mitigate the fallout from that and find a way to create a new system that keeps people safer. And this is all because of Rachel Carson. She was derided through her life and through the last years of her life as an agitator, as un-American, because she was talking about how, these chemicals created by these great American companies are killing our planet.
Mm-hmm.
And people do not listen to her. Posthumously, however, her view, the way the world viewed her, turned around quite a bit. She was posthumously granted the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Jimmy Earl Carter.
As she well deserved.
However, and a lot of the things that she put for were eventually put into law. There was the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, which was about how to protect, how to safely use these very useful and very, important pesticides that do have a purpose, that are protecting our crops, that are protecting our soldiers, but in a way to do them safe and make sure that we're not doing more damage. However, 1980s, here comes Ronald Reagan, and he rolled back most of these policies that were a result of Rachel Carson's direct work.
Of course he did.
Reagan, yeah. The economy was booming, but, our planet was dying, and they had a pandemic that the president did a shitty job of running. So let's see what happens next. That's sort of the life of Rachel Carson. There is an amazing PBS documentary about it called, I believe, just Silent Spring, I think. I checked it out on the American Experience series, which I'm a huge fan of, as we've said before. But that is kind of the life of Rachel Carson.
It's so fascinating to me to be able to look at attitudes of the overall society in not only her time. There's several different figures in history, like Hans Christian Andersen, who also had letters that later, suggested that they had a different orientation than they presented as. And so, I'm always curious about members of my own family, in the past. There's cool pictures, but there just isn't enough documentation to find out, what was going on in their lives. With the complexity of Rachel Carson's life, with the complexity of our own lives, I really feel like this is a part of a story that needs to be told more deeply in everybody's personal family stories.
Yeah, I think that one thing that is worrying to me as a historian and someone who recognizes that the way that we preserve information has changed dramatically in my lifetime, letters still exist. And every one that I get, every card that I get, I save. I absolutely kind of keep it for reasons like that, because email, is not going to last forever. All of this stuff that we're posting on Facebook, all of our messages on Facebook, if Dorothy and Rachel had Facebook and we're just messaging back and forth, we wouldn't have these letters, we wouldn't have that, and that relationship is just between the two of them.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's so much easier to delete it. You don't have to get together and have a big burn party for all of your, for your deep and dark personal thoughts. You just, smash up your laptop and throw it in the ocean, something like that. Either way, it doesn't have to be as ceremonial as the burning of the letters.
It's important to write down, in physical media. I've kept a journal, for years, just writing down, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, but still something every day, because of the importance that it might hold for future biographers of me, obviously, future biographers of my friends, or more importantly, what it's like to exist in this unprecedented time.
You know what we need to do is we need to just get rich, donate a bunch of money to the library, and then just make a Charley McCorn part of the library with all of your letters and all of your pictures and everything. Just start doing it now. The sooner the better. I'll make some calls.
Absolutely. I think Missoula Public Library needs to get on it. I was their Volunteer of the Year in 2015, which I think is one step closer to full recognition for my influence at the public library.
Everybody at the public library in Missoula, Montana knows who you are, Charley. That being said, I think that we need to also name something after me. I just have always wanted that. And now that we're, on the topic of it, I think that that's something that I should just put out there into the world.
I feel that if we wanted to accurately portray the posthumous awards of any of our comedians, it should absolutely be that dumpster behind the Union Club.
Oh yeah, totally.
This is the Charley and Lenny Memorial dumpster. They allegedly may have gotten high back here many times.
Oh, maybe consider naming all of the dumpsters behind the biggest bars in Missoula after different comics from around town.
And that's Rachel Carson's.
Oh yeah, totally. Rachel Carson. That's what this entire episode is about. It definitely was not just me trying to get a dumpster named after me. Okay, so what year did she die again?
She died in 1964.
There was also some other major environmental issues brought on, like around the time of like the Depression.
The Dust Bowl.
Yeah, and nobody had like really looked into it before that.
It was part of the reason, and this is like a larger historical conversation, and I know I'm going to do a really poor job of kind of getting to the nuance of why America was the way it was in 1962. But coming out of World War II, you know, a truly mechanized war, like World War I, like a mechanized war, World War II, you know, atomic bombs. But it was sort of the might of the American. It was seen by the people at the time that the American industrial system had won the war.
Mm-hmm.
We have all of these new chemicals and all of these new products. Plastics are blowing up, which, Jesus Christ, speaking of Silent Spring and killing things, plastic is everywhere. It is in us, it is in our food, it is in our water. And it was like, oh, look at how great this is. We have plastic. No, look at all these amazing futuristic amenities. Look at like that, like the space race in the 1960s and sort of that boom that came with that. It's like, well, yeah, we can go to the moon because science can do anything. Oh, look what, you know, the space program has created this amazing new thing in our day-to-day life. And, you know, these chemicals, you know, before widespread use of pesticides and DDT, the way that we're talking about, at least in the context of this conversation, you know, malaria was a killer. Yellow fever was a killer. U.S. soldiers, U.S. workers, the Panama Canal, like specifically, were battling mosquitoes because the mosquitoes were killing them. You know, and pesticides are like, well, look what we've invented, and now we have domain over nature. And we didn't consider, you know, not that we were playing in the realm of God, but when we think that we have domain over nature, all we're really saying is we are slowly killing the thing that keeps us alive.
Yeah, right.
We need to, you know, I think while things have sort of like roller coastered up and down since the publication of Silent Spring, I think it's pretty clear that we have irreparably fucked things up and we need to do something about it. And the first step is saying something, which Rachel Carson did, which, you know, her interests, her skills coalesced into the thing that built the modern environmental rights movement.
Okay, it was definitely Rachel Carson and not Iron Eyes Cody.
It was not. It was not. Are we doing an episode on the Italian crying Indian at some point?
Yes, we will. I totally do. It is really kind of amazing the things that we could do with what we have available.
Yeah, it's just strange to understand that the scientific method and sort of the proof that people have, like the way that we can prove things, the way that we prove our theories, the way Rachel Carson proved her theory about Silent Spring was by doing the work. She didn't just like write a book like, ooh, wonder what's going on here. Maybe it's this, maybe it's this. She did the science. She was a writer, she was a biologist, and she was a conservationist. And so all of those skills, you know, showed her that if I need to prove this, I need to do the work. But despite the work being done, there are people that will still, much like now, it's like, hey, if we all wear face masks, we're going to save thousands of lives. They'll say, well, no, it's a hoax. It's a scam. The science, I don't believe it. And I guess it doesn't matter or not if you believe in the science, because it's science. It's the way our universe works. It is the foundational, like, sort of understanding of our world. And yes, our understanding of the world changes. Obviously, this story of Rachel Carson is a very interesting, you know, example of that. But we have to be moving forward, or we're all going to get stuck in the past.
Absolutely. I agree. The way that I was taught to see it as a native and growing up being raised by my grandmother, who was very in tune with the teachings of her grandmother, that humans are actually the lowest level of existence on Earth. Whereas,
I believe that. I feel that about myself. That's true about me. I agree.
And the reason for it is because the Earth can live without humans. Like, the Earth can thrive and exist without human beings but it couldn't without animals. It couldn't without the plants. It couldn't without the atmosphere and everything else. And so when we're looking at like levels of importance, you know, things like water and things like the way that the plants and animals sustain themselves, humans aren't anywhere in that. We're actually the children of all of the things that are more important to us. I did not say that the way that I remembered her saying it to me. She was so much more concise about it, but I think you got the point.
I do. I absolutely do. So with that, what are we talking about next week, Lenny?
So next week we will be talking about the sexy blues movement that started around the 1920s. I'm going to talk a little bit about some musicians such as Lucille Bogan, who had some like super dirty, super spicy like music from that time.
It's exciting. I look forward to it.
Me too. Sexy music.
Okay. Well, for Social Justice Weirdos, my name is Charley McCorn.
And my name is Lenny Peppers.
Remember, throw a brick. Or not, because I forget what our sign-off is every week. I could build a house out of the bricks, all the different bricks that I've talked about on this show.
Yes, you could build a house with the bricks, and obviously other building materials that we've talked about in the show.
And horses.
Yes, and horses.
Sure. People who live in glass houses shouldn't fight horses, is all I'm saying.
And people who live in horse houses shouldn't throw bricks.
Absolutely.